Elizabeth, you want to get us?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think we're all here. So welcome back. I'm seeing 98 people. So this is everybody. This is the folks who were in the produce safety work group meetings, as well as those who were in the preventive controls work group meeting. So we are all here again together. And this is just, we wanted to have this hour at the end of the day to just reconnect, and for those who were not in each other's work group meetings, just to give a quick high level summary of what was discussed so that everybody's aware of what the other groups talked about. Also, just to share the highlights of the meeting, give some of that high level takeaway stuff, but just also focus on some of the really interesting and exciting points coming out of the different groups. If we have time, we'll do a bit of some open mic and other reflections with everybody. If folks just have thoughts or feelings they want to share with the group, if we have time, we'll get to that. But let's start first with the produce safety work group summary. And Chris is very happily going to give an overview so that everybody's aware of what the process and information was that they went through. Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So for those who weren't aware, day one of the NECAFS annual meeting this year was actually a regulator specific meeting where they, among other things, consolidated a list of observations or issues or misunderstandings that they have seen throughout the past year during inspections. And so that sort of that provided the foundation, if you will, for the produce safety sessions this year. And so that's what kicked us off. Based on that list, we also, the first produce safety session breakout groups, which I think there were about 10 or so running in parallel, looked at that list and tried to add specific examples based on what other folks had seen. So this is now regulatory folks, but also educators and some industry folks as well, together in these breakout rooms, looking at a common list and sort of personalizing it and adding some specifics to it, asking questions for clarification. What do you mean by this? What does that look like to you? And really sort of developing more of a shared sense of what is happening and why, and trying to identify not only what's happening, but what needs does it represent on the part of the grower stakeholders. And then the second breakout session yesterday was to then take those specific needs and issues and think about what barriers are getting in the way of improved practice or adoption of change, and what actions might we take collectively or in small groups, or even individually, to overcome some of those barriers. So again, we had 10 groups in breakouts going through and thinking about barriers and actions that might help address the barriers. And then finally today, the breakout sessions focused on what sort of framework going forward as NECAFS, what sort of framework would help to continue this conversation and take what we have identified as specific needs, barriers, actions to address those needs. What can we do collectively to have improved continuous communication around these issues, focused research, collective lit review, collaborative development of educational resources and programs, and frankly, just increased awareness about what might already exist that doesn't need to be created. So that was the context or the structure of the produce safety sessions this year. And I think with that, I'd like to ask some of the facilitators, if they're willing, to just provide a couple of highlights from your session. So can we start with Carol Allen?
Oh, the perils of being at the beginning of the alphabet. So we had really, having facilitated 3 groups over the 2 days, this last group was dynamite. We had such a good and fruitful outcome. But I do want to touch on a couple of things that I think we came away with, and in response to regularly identify key produce safety priorities. We kind of felt like an annual getting together or meeting of the minds or summit was probably maybe not often enough. I know, I'm scared. Yeah, I scared you, didn't I? We were thinking that if some of our produce safety issues were, first of all, we had free communication, like a little button on the NECAFS website where we could go in and we could put that inspiration or that issue that we saw in the field and we could get it down. And then those ideas would be put together and maybe one of the priorities selected for a working group. I know it's another bad word, isn't it? A working group that would include educators, researchers, agents, everybody put together. They would summarize maybe a rule or an interpretation of a rule, and that would be put forth and disseminated in maybe a webinar. We have Zooms, we have webinars now. We can get together more often without having to shell out big bucks to get together. So I think being able to communicate with one another, share ideas between one another more frequently at less cost, and developing a more impactful statement, maybe really focusing on something, might be a benefit.
Thanks so much, Carol. Appreciate that. How about Elizabeth Hodgdon? Any highlights from your conversations you'd like to share?
Sure, and we also came up with the idea of working groups and meeting more frequently. So I was interested to hear that came up, and Carol, in your group as well. And a couple of the highlights of our last breakout room was that we talked about how, not all of us that are involved in NECAFS are microbiologists, and there's a need for being able to understand some of the latest research. And so we talked about the importance of having a network of people, that we're working with, where we're working with scientists, educators, and regulators, and having more frequent opportunities, maybe through webinars, to get together and discuss some of the latest research results that have implications for how to manage food safety risks on farms, and talking, as a group about how to use that new information to inform our recommendations when we're working one-on-one with growers. We also talked a lot about potentially, the need to bring in more buyers into the conversations, and potentially how NECAFS can work on, that component where, bridging that gap with education for buyers, understanding the different inspections and implications, and bringing them into the conversation is the first step there. I think those are, the main takeaways. We had a good conversation this afternoon.
Thanks, Elizabeth, very much. How about Matt Arno from New York?
All right. So in our last group, we came up with the same things that the other two said. If we could meet up, like have a Zoom meeting monthly or quarterly, we thought that would be beneficial. But two other things that we came up with that I thought was good was someone mentioned that the initial training, produce safety training, a lot of the regulators had was in California, and it wasn't really representative of the farms that we see, in our work. So maybe if NECAFS could incorporate some maybe trainings on the types of farms that we see regularly, that might be beneficial. Even if it's just a farm tour and discussion or something like that. And also we thought maybe developing a uniform compliance strategy across the region, maybe that's something that NECAFS could help out with.
Thanks, Matt.
Sure.
Elizabeth, I just want to check in with you on time. Should we transition over to PC group at this point, or what do you think?
Sure. I think that would be great.
Just before we do that, from the produce safety sessions, I just want to open it up for one or two comments if anybody is feeling particularly strongly about a topic that came up that hasn't been shared in this session yet, I'd love to hear that. And a quick note, all of these breakout sessions took really great notes in a series of Google Docs. Elizabeth and I will work on collecting all of that into a report that we'll publish for everybody. So this isn't meant to be a comprehensive summary right now. We'll do that in writing. But if anybody from a produce safety section breakout session wanted to share anything.
Yeah, Chris, I will if you don't mind.
Yeah, thanks, Roger.
I thought we had buildings and equipment, and we, after through the 3 sessions, we sort of distilled it down, and I think co-benefits and approaching some of these food safety practices through how are there co-benefits and adjacencies that that add to improve yield, improve efficiency. That's really important, I think, for capturing the farmer's attention. Increasing the number of food safety technicians, whether it's peer-to-peer networks. Kristen mentioned Michigan and using trained personnel out of the soil and water conservation districts. I think we have the mechanisms in place to actually implement that. And also for improving that culture of food safety among growers is better education on the risks. And Ollie made the comment that, it's about protecting the most vulnerable. Those of us on the farm, we're pretty immune to most of the things we've been exposed to since childhood or prenatal. So, it's important to put that. And I think our past year with the COVID pandemic has made us all aware of the vulnerabilities of others. And then encourage and support risk reducing practices. As I said during the lunch break, maybe we shouldn't be washing things, maybe especially for the direct marketers and the short supply chains, some of those practices that are done in the commodity side with longer supply chains aren't really required for short supply chains. And I think we should definitely encourage that, especially in the Northeast where that is the majority of our growers. Thank you.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Roger. Any other final thoughts from the produce safety? Folks were nearly 80 of them. So big group, appreciate everybody's efforts. Okay, Elizabeth, do you want to dig in with the preventive?
Yeah, so Amanda Kinchla is going to give us some high-level summary of the preventive controls work group.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everyone. I've tried to share my screen. It's just an outline just to kind of keep me on track, and you're now entering my headspace. But so the preventive controls group covered a lot of material. We started off with getting some updates about the Food Safety Preventive Controls Alliance curricula, and what's happening in particular is forward thinking. There's going to be some, for those that don't know, the PC, the Preventive Controls program is going to be updated when in the future, we don't really know, within the next year or so, with some significant changes, including streamlining for efficiency to reduce duplicative efforts, increasing instructor support for better delivery, other programs to kind of give prerequisite type of education for those that might need it, and a whole host of other types of components, including the consideration of including some sort of assessment or exam at the end for the participants. So this was interesting to raise our awareness of what's coming down the pike and how that involves the NECAFS. We also heard from Lori Holmquist from the FDA giving us a perspective of some of the updates related to inspections in the processing space to get a better idea of where our needs could be targeted. And then Andrea Gilbert from University of Maryland gave us a summary of a needs assessment that we, NECAFS, had deployed last year, but she's been able to really dive deeper into the findings of that work to kind of give us a path of where future direction is. The other thing is important to know is that our group, we've had a defined pillars of our efforts into 3 primary categories: resources, evaluation, and awareness. And so I'll explain what those are in just a second, but over the past couple of years, at first we were like, what the heck are we doing? And we kind of were able to have these discussions about where the needs are specifically for small processors and how can we make those efforts. So in doing so, we kind of bucketed our project themes into these groups. So resources specifically is mining through existing content across the nation relevant to preventive controls and trying to pull out in a very structured way how to categorize or catalog this information so it's more accessible using the clearinghouse. And for just to kind of remember that we've got Annie now in our wheelhouse, who is a librarian, and she totally got her geek on about showing us how we can cross-link resources to more effectively reach our audience, which was super exciting. So Beth gave us an update about all the different types of resources and the methods we're using to corral those. And then Annie gave us a showcase of how we're going to present this stuff in webs for access for our processors. Evaluation, Nicole Richard gave us an update about the different types of a survey that we're trying to administer that's the same across all of those that are deploying the preventive controls, so we can get a better insight as to what is effective and what the opportunities are to help better serve the food safety communicators in our region. And then Luke gave us an update about our awareness group, which is how, if participants aren't coming to our programming or using our technical resources, we know there's a lot more of these folks that could serve with using some of the resources that exist. How do we reach them? So we discussed a lot about what our preliminary branding and communication tools are in terms of postcards, websites, and then thinking about more about what type of organizations we haven't tapped into to be more effective in raising the awareness about the resources that we have, and also how to reach food safety communicators like extension educators, food safety consultants, et cetera. So to that end, we have a survey going out that has been out through NECAFS, but we resurfaced it in today's discussion, talking about how to self-identify yourself as a food safety communicator so that we can create a more accessible map of the people, so you can talk to a human to figure out what your steps are. So kind of modeling after that ag water testing system in the Northeast, but locating the people that are able to provide some sort of food safety communications to our target users. And then we also took a moment to talk about collaborations for food safety outreach program grants. So for those that don't know, the USDA's funding cycle for the food safety outreach program was posted in January. And so we took a few minutes to just kind of matchmake, if you will, about certain project opportunities that we want, or wish lists of things that we think would be beneficial to NECAFS and our users at large, and kind of got some ideas about where to go for next steps. So this afternoon, that was kind of the big synopsis of what we did over the past day and a half. But as we wrapped up today, we really wanted to kind of focus on where are we going for next year? What do we want to do? And so we came to the consensus that, it took a little while to build these working groups, and the group felt strongly that the consensus of these working groups, the 3 pillars of awareness, resources, and evaluation, were still effective and making traction. And we wanted to keep those still a strong focal point and consider branching out of other work in the future, but keeping that framework. But to build on that, we got a lot of great feedback in our working groups over the past couple of days to kind of think about how the processes that we could do to take this to the next step. So for example, in the awareness group, we kind of started spitballing about the different types of organizations that we all have connected with, and starting to build a formalized roster of organizations so that we can have a more effective outreach strategy with all of the awareness tools that we're having built. The other thing we talked about is that we could improve our connection with regulators and educators. And so that would help improve our outreach strategies, but also synergize, our work. So some of the discussion there was first assessing how communication exists among different states. So for example, Pennsylvania channels communication between educators and regulators differently than in Massachusetts, and kind of look at what best practices exist, and then see how we can build a better plan for communication within that arena. The other thing was thinking about the resources group. We told you that, we've got a whole bunch of materials that are already outlined, but we thought about having a method where we could identify the gaps for future direction. And so we talked about establishing a process in particular about how we could formulate where those assessments are, where those gaps are, survey them so that we can generate opportunity to fulfill those gaps. Specifically, the other thing we noticed in the resource group is that some of the low-hanging fruit of development opportunity is related to allergens and environmental monitoring programs. And then finally, the future direction we want to try to take a stronger active role is looking about how the FSPCA is looking into assessments as part of the curriculum. And so we had some discussion about thinking about how to be involved in that so that the assessment metrics are reasonable and reachable for our small processors, while still delivering onto the main core competencies that we want to get out of the preventive controls. And so an action item that we discussed is trying to establish some sort of liaison or a better integration with FSPCA to be involved with that. So that's kind of the hit list of a day and a half. I'm just gonna look to the preventive controls working group people. Is there anything you would like to add, comments? Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Amanda. That was very thorough. I appreciate that. And I know that one of the things we struggle with is that people often do a little bit in both, or some people do a little bit in both of PC and produce safety, but you can't be in two places at once. And so we appreciate the walkthrough because I think that helps at least to keep people a little bit more informed of what the other side was talking about during the time. So I appreciate that. I think we wanted to just give a little bit of time for open mic and just let folks have reflections from the meeting. This was different this year for us, but I think from my perspective, still incredibly successful. Some of you have actually already responded to the annual meeting evaluation. And so I was looking at the responses, and one of the things that I was really interested in, because we asked, did you meet someone new this year? And I thought, oh, that's not going to happen because we can't all just hang out in the hall. But everybody who's responded has said yes. And I think that that's because we had these breakout groups, and we really wanted to facilitate that type of interaction so that somehow on some level that networking and establishing relationships could still continue to happen. So just interested to hear folks' thoughts, highlights, something new you learned, someone new you met, something just as a positive takeaway from the meeting. I could go around the region and just start with different states. How about someone from Maine? Anything from Maine? Leah, are you the only person from Maine?
No, Chris and Hobb should be
here.
Yeah. So
Chris and Hobb are here, of course. Back.
Owen was here before, too.
And Jason was here, too. Any thoughts from Maine?
Well, it depends a little on what you mean by met new people. I was in room with new people and we had excellent conversations, but I wish we could have shared a beer or even just a coffee in the hallway. But yeah, definitely saw some new faces and had a great time. Would prefer to be in person, but this is what we have right now.
Thanks, Hobb. How about New Hampshire?
Hi, this is Heather. I was very impressed with how well this worked out. One thing that came up in our group was that the research summary that Dr. Milner, I think her name was, did today was great, and we'd love to see more of that. And particularly if we could see like a summary in advance and then have a big chunk of the time dedicated to discussion. I would have loved to have picked her brain a little bit more.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Heather. How about Vermont? Andy, are you out there?
I'm here. Hello. Yeah, no, I think when I first got the link to this webinar event thing, I was like, oh man, I got to sign into another thing. It's not just a one-click link. But honestly, I was quite impressed with how this was all set up. So nice job on your part to arrange all of this. I know breakout rooms and things add complications, but I thought it went quite smoothly. And honestly, I liked the kind of coffee roundtable in the morning. I thought that was a nice little networking session as well. Little feedback. I guess it would have been cool to hear from a couple other people about some of the projects they're working on. Kind of missed that this year, all working group. But no, I think this workshop went well and it was beneficial. So thanks.
Thanks, Andy. And maybe Andy, for those of you who don't know, is usually our the guy who's videotaping us in the back of the room. So this year he actually just got to sit and listen and enjoy. So hopefully it was a different experience for you, Andy, but still probably good. So
yeah, I couldn't capture too many fun photos of the crowd for you today, like I usually do, but I'll have to reuse some old photos next time.
Thanks. How about Massachusetts?
Yeah, it's been wonderful. It's been the progression from, you know, when we started this back in Boston through Baltimore and Albany. It's the networking, the friendships, the ability to share our thoughts, you know, comfortably and discuss moving the steps we need to evolve. I think have culminated this year. I think you've done an incredibly good job, Elizabeth. I know the regulators. I can speak, I think, for most of the regulators, you know, after last conference, we were, you know, looking at different options, but boy, it's been a great conference. It really has. It's been productive. I've met new people. I'm starting to realize that that's important because we do have turnover. We have new people, new educators, new regulators who show up and sort of, it's a great forum for them to meet their peers within the region and you know, contribute to all the wonderful work we do here. So great job.
Thanks, Michael. Let's see, how about New Jersey?
Hi, this is Liz. I thought it was a really nice way to conduct the meetings. It worked out pretty well. I had some internet snafus this morning, but overall it went well. I liked that we had the regulator meeting first and we went into depth on things that we really wanted the educators to understand. And then we had the time to talk about it in the chat rooms. It'll be interesting to read all of what went on in all the different chat rooms. So I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you. How about Maryland?
I'll go. I thought that the breakouts were really, really productive, and I just want to commend everybody who organized those and the facilitators of all the breakout rooms. I think we did a really good job, or you guys did a really good job of organizing the questions in such a way where we were able to drill down and really break apart what the common problems we see or the anecdotes that we see as we get into our, you know, as we work in produce safety throughout the year. And I'm really excited to see the big long summary of what everybody talked about and looking at what the next steps are going to be and how everyone can get involved. So it was quite invigorating for me. So thank you.
Thanks, Angela. How about West Virginia?
This is Jeremy. Y'all did a really nice job organizing it.
Hey, Jeremy, you're really choppy. I don't know. You're breaking up a lot. Can you start again? Sorry.
Sure. Can you hear me any better now?
Sure.
Okay. We've had ice storms, snowstorms, all kinds of weather, and it drove us. I was able to participate the whole time, but y'all did a really nice job organizing the breakout groups, with us kids with directions we wanted to go and where we needed that extra information and education. So I think I can speak for our group, and we got other folks on as well. So thanks again for everything.
Thanks, Jeremy. I caught some of what you said. It was a little bit choppy, but thank you. I don't know. Is anybody else from West Virginia on that wants to reflect? That was a little choppy, Jeremy. That's all right. Thank you so much. Pennsylvania.
All right, I'll go. This is my second year here, and it's just really nice to see some familiar faces. I met a lot of new people last year and a few new ones this year. The breakout sessions were awesome. We had a lot of really good discussions. And I think one of the things, in addition to meeting new people and getting some new ideas, is it's just nice to know that my frustrations with the food safety practices of our small processors are universal, and it's not just my group. So appreciate the group commiseration and the ability to look for solving problems together and helping each other.
Thank you, Carrie. How about New York?
Well, thank you, Elizabeth and Chris and the rest of the NECAFS team for putting this together. We, again, this meeting exceeded our expectations. And it's, as usual, the best meeting of the year. We learned a lot, and I'd like to thank all the states that participated and chipped in for facilitation and planning and contributing to the meeting. Even Massachusetts did a great job.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate your feedback. How about Connecticut?
Yeah, no, I agree. This is Mark. I agree with Aaron 100% that it really is the best meeting of the year. And this year was outstanding, consider the circumstances we had to work through. The regulator meeting day was just great. I think it's definitely needed. And the other thing I really liked was just the small breakout sessions with the small groups of people. Got to see some familiar faces, got to see some new ones. Hopefully people will get to know better in the future. And I hope that's something you'll consider in the future, is keeping those nice small groups together. Again, Elizabeth, Chris, and your whole team did an outstanding job, and thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I know with the small breakouts, it's always in person. It's hard from a logistical standpoint, but I think that if it brings benefit, and it sounds like from the comments that that's the case, that we can work that into future meetings where we're in person. How about Rhode Island?
So I'll echo some other thoughts of folks, and I want to say thank you to Elizabeth and Chris and everyone else at NECAFS, because again, I think this was better than expected, which is a good thing. It's like, it was great. I felt it was very productive, and we've all had meetings in this type of format that tend not to be productive, and this was. And so we're grateful for that. Really happy for the meeting with the one-day regulator meeting. That format, I think, was really helpful for us. And again, to mimic the breakout sessions were great. I felt like it really emulated sitting around a table with 6 to 10 people and having a discussion, which is what these meetings, I feel like you get the most out of, that type of small dynamic group discussion, and those breakout sessions mimic that a lot. So that was really helpful, and also just great to hear people's perspective. That's, I think, one of the best parts is just hearing other perspectives and having sounding boards and those type of discussions. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ananda. And then last, Delaware.
I will echo that this was a better meeting than I thought it was going to be. Certainly, I loved the breakout sessions, learned a lot of new resources, a lot of people talking about projects that were going to be beneficial to interact with them. And then, of course, as was said, different perspectives.
Thank you, Gordon. And I can promise you that we did not do this open mic in an attempt to just hear flattering things about our meeting, but I appreciate the reassurances. That's great. Thank you. Everything that everybody said was positive, but if you have any negative things to contribute, Chris and I are always eager to hear those things as well. So please do not hesitate to reach out. Chris, did you want to have any more group discussion or have any other issues you wanted to highlight?
Just something for folks to maybe think about. I think when I was looking through the Google Docs and actually the conversation just now, I'm hearing, people love the in-person annual meeting, which is difficult to do small breakout groups in. At the same time, I'm hearing a lot of interest in this sort of consistent groups, almost cohorts that go along throughout the year. So maybe we frame something around that is more sustained on a quarterly basis using a virtual platform, and then at the annual meeting it is a larger group, but these smaller these smaller, I don't want to call them work groups, smaller social networks or something, have that thread from the year, and it can come together in an annual meeting. So anyway, something to think about. Would love some thoughts from people.
Yeah, and the other thing I think that does, Chris, is that as we saw with the regulators, with that small planning group, they were then able to identify specific homework that they wanted to do amongst themselves ahead of time, which I think allowed our conversation to be at 90% before we even started having it, instead of starting from 0. So some of that work also can be happening throughout the year, which I think would mean that then when we do get together, we're not starting from the beginning, reorienting everybody. We're just picking up of what's been discussed and the work that's been done, and then we're just together where we can dig in. So I think that there's some real benefit to doing that, and would be happy to make that happen.
I will say there was a couple of notes in the docs about still people wanting the ability to pop around a little bit as well. So there are these multiple needs, but we'll sort it out. We'll find a way.
Yeah, anything else? Any other thoughts or closing comments? I'm going to post again in the chat, just so it's at the bottom for you, the link to the evaluation. I'll be following up with email so you have it as well. But again, we really appreciate your feedback. So thank you for taking the time to provide that. Let's see. And so I think that's it. The only thing I wanted to mention was that if folks are feeling like they still want to hang out with each other, the networking rooms are still open and they will remain open. So you can continue to discuss over there if you'd like to continue to connect for the rest of the afternoon. But otherwise, that's it for NECAFS. So just want to thank you again for coming and participating and all the work you did to get us here. We couldn't do it without you, literally. So appreciate your time. Chris, any final thoughts?
Just a big thank you again to Elizabeth. She's the one that really does all the heavy lifting here, and all the facilitators who joined in to make this all happen, and also for Perform Media, who did all the tech AV for us. So thanks, everybody. And thank you to USDA and FDA for being supportive of this work.
Thank you. Take care.